I'm also on the Shan model of having 30 slides in 30 minutes, so we'll see what we can do. I don't have 30 minutes, even more of a challenge. So I work in Southwest Georgia. I'm a biologist with the Wildlife Conservation section. My primary duties are working with red-cockaded woodpeckers and other avian species in the piney woods. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today and about how we burn for some of those species. The properties in Southwest Georgia that I'm going to refer to also have red-cockaded woodpeckers, and they also are quail focal areas. And so the way we burn on those is a little bit different than maybe the way we burn in the rest of the state on other WMAs, but I think it's applicable to private landowners as well. So it's kind of difficult to start talking about fire in this part of the world without at least talking about longleaf pine briefly. Some of you may be familiar with this, but if you look at this map, the light green shaded area is the historic range of longleaf in Georgia, primarily in the coastal plain, but you'll see it extends up into the montane longleaf on the western side of the state. And the dark green areas are the current occurrences of natural longleaf pine. That big dark green blob in East Georgia is Fort Stewart. If you look down where the red star is, just west of us, that's the Red Hills area around Thomasville and Tallahassee. So you can see we've lost a lot of the longleaf we historically had, which has lots of implications for species management. So they once covered 90 million acres in the Southeast, and this is a fire-dependent system. These fires were started by lightning, by Native Americans. Historically, they would have had a 1 to 4 year frequency, depending on where you're at. Some dendrochronology work. Huh? Oh, sorry. Like this? Is that better? Okay. Anyway, some dendrochronology work done at the Jones Center at Itchaway shows that some of those stands burned every year, sometimes even less than a year. And so the point being, it's a very frequent occurrence in these stands, which also influence the plant composition, plant adaptations, and as a result, a lot of the animal species that live there. These stands had a natural sort of open park-like appearance, which you can see in that top picture. You can see a long ways. And ultimately, they're just made to burn. Between the longleaf needles being highly combustible, the structure of the wiregrass, when the needles fall in the wiregrass, air gets underneath, it just wants to burn. And so it did for many, many years. Again, lots of diversity, especially in the ground cover. A lot of people may look at a stand like this and say, wow, it's nothing but pines. But the diversity many, many times is down low. Up to 30 different plant species per square meter. Highly diverse with a bunch of different orchids and, pitcher plants and other really cool plants that you don't find in other places. But we know that humans have had an impact on these systems for a long, long time, going back 12,000 years or more. That picture at the top is a bison skull with a projectile point embedded in it that was pulled out of the Wasissa River, not too far from here. When DeSoto spent the winter near Tallahassee back in the 1500s, he noted vast Native American agricultural fields. So we know that there's a long history of human involvement here, all the way up through the 1800s when we started converting land to cotton farming, and now to subdivisions and highways and things of that nature. Which leads us to this. This looks pretty familiar, right? The stand on the left is, a fire-suppressed stand. The one on the right is very common. We see this all the time, slash and loblolly plantations in this part of the world. So as a result of this conversion and habitat change, there are a number of species that are endemic to that longleaf pine system that are of special conservation concern. Either they're threatened, they're endangered, or we're just monitoring them. Everything from flatwood salamanders to indigo snakes to Henslow's sparrows. And many of these species are imperiled because they have very specific habitat requirements. They evolved over time with this fire-dependent system, which is very unique. And in the absence of that, they struggle to thrive and survive. Sometimes they can't. If you compare that with more common species like white-tailed deer or bullfrogs, things like that that seem to do even better in altered environments. So these are the species that we have to pay attention to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some piney woods or upland pine birds in Georgia that we're particularly concerned with. Red cockaded woodpecker, northern bobwhite. You see several here. I'm going to talk about the Bachman sparrow as well. But aside from birds, in our latest state wildlife action plan, we identified 102 species of greatest conservation need that would benefit from more fire. So it's an important practice that we really need to get on the ground more. First species I'm going to mention is one that's near and dear to my heart. It's the RCW, red cockaded woodpecker. It was listed as, it's listed currently as threatened under Endangered Species Act. It was endangered up until last year when it was downlisted. But it's a really cool bird, and it's really unique in that it excavates its cavity in a living pine tree. It's the only woodpecker here that we have that does that. Most use dead, rotted trees where the excavating is easier. It's considered a keystone species and a primary cavity nester, meaning that it makes cavities that other species use down the line. So pretty important. Cavities are important resources in the woods for a lot of different species. One reason they're endangered is they require threatened is they require large acreages of open, mature, frequently burned pine forest. We just looked at a map a little while ago. We don't have much of that left, right? So that's why they're imperiled. They are adapted to and they're dependent on regular, frequent fires to maintain that habitat. And the older the trees, the better, because if you've got to make your cavity in a living tree, which you can see in that picture, that's a woodpecker eye view on Greenwood Plantation near Thomasville. But it's a lot of work, right? These older trees get something called red heart rot, which makes the excavation easier. But another cool thing they do is they'll peck through the bark to the sap, make sap flow. That's kind of a visual cue for other woodpeckers. It helps to deter snakes and other predators from getting into the cavity. They benefit from quail management, and quail can benefit from woodpecker management. They both live in the same system. And in fact, if you look at where they occur in the state of Georgia, some of these red spots overlap with the dark green current longleaf occurrences. So, but you'll notice down in southwest Georgia where the Red Hills are, the Red Hills is 300,000 contiguous acres of quail hunting properties that are managed with fire and timber work. And coincidentally, they also have the largest population of red cockaded woodpeckers on private lands anywhere in the range of the species. So that's proof that the two can go hand in hand. Which brings us to the northern bobwhite. The firebird, as Herbert Stoddard referred to it, it's an important game species. It's very economically important. Tall Timbers just updated their economic study for the bobwhite in the Thomasville area and found that it contributes almost $232 million to the local economy through jobs, equipment, tourism, things of that nature. So it's a very important species economically and ecologically. And management for bobwhites on a landscape scale, whether it's in Albany or the Thomasville area, has benefited a lot of species: woodpeckers, gopher tortoises, so on and so forth. Okay, the last species I'm going to touch on is the Bachman sparrow. It kind of slips under the radar sometimes if you're not a birder. It's a mid-sized sparrow with a very distinctive voice. If you've spent much time in these environments, you've probably heard it, whether you recognize the voice or not. But they're an interesting bird. They require open pine habitats. They can even use young clear cuts and stuff for a few years. But ultimately, they need open grassy habitats. Once we get 3 years post-fire, their use of those stands declines precipitously. They don't mind a few little shrubs to perch on and call, but by and large, they like it open. So I guess the take home from that is that these pine stands are diverse, whether they're planted or natural. If they're managed with fire and they're managed right, they're diverse. About 100 bird species are found in these stands throughout the year, half of which are found in the ground cover or in the understory, which is also where fire has the most impact. So it's also interesting to note that these grassland birds, which ultimately these systems are basically grasslands with trees, right? these grassland birds have declined by 50% over the last 50 years. So they're very important, and we keep track of them from that perspective. This graph on the right, I got this from Jim Cox, and it follows bird species richness on NB66. NB66 is a plot on tall timbers that was open piney woods, quail woods. They quit burning it in 1966 and let it grow up. They monitored over time in the absence of fire. And you can see the further away we get from fire, the decline in the species richness of birds. So that kind of illustrates the importance of fire for these species. And that stand is basically a hardwood forest with a few remnant pines in the canopy now. Sort of looking at it another way, Diana McGrath put this together for me. Thank you, Diana. DNR monitors a number of WMAs around the state each spring doing point counts, looking at a suite of piney woods species, which you can see there on the left. And Diana put this together, and it kind of illustrates that fact. The higher the proportion of the management area that's burned, the greater the abundance of the focal species that we're monitoring. And that's over several different years. Okay, so with regards to fire, a lot of it goes back to objectives, right? But I'm going to talk about three basic elements. Frequency, how often the fire is applied to a stand, how often we burn it, scale, and the season, whether we burn it in the growing season or the dormant season. And it's important to remember that a lot of times what we do is we're burning for a community a lot of times rather than one particular species. But looking at that bottom picture with the fire, anybody got any ideas what's going on there? I'll tell you, we're burning around red cockaded woodpecker trees. I mentioned that sap. If you're not careful with fire, it can catch that sap on fire and burn up the tree. So a lot of times what we do is just light around that tree and let it back slowly away to keep the flame front from hitting it and burning it. So frequency is important. We use in our WMAs, we use a 2-year fire return in the upland pine stands for a couple of reasons. Number one, it sort of mimics that natural fire regime. It does minimize woody midstory. It also helps maintain these fire-dependent habitats with relatively low fire intensity. We're burning them every other year, so we don't have great amounts of fuel accumulation. So it ideally makes that fire a little easier to control and maintain without getting too wild, though you can still get wild if you're not careful. I think most quail-focused properties in the area do the same, about a 2-year rotation. I remember back in school looking at stuff on fire, and invariably they would say, you know, burn every 3 to 5 years. If you are in our neck of the woods with fertile soils and you're trying to maintain open habitats, burning every 3 to 5 years is going to get away from you. The hardwoods will really take over and be difficult to get under control. So scale is another important factor. Burn scale meaning burn block size, how much we're burning at one time. On these WMAs that I'm referring to, we've gone to 50 acres or less. I think the average is considerably smaller than 50 acres. Other WMAs use much larger burn blocks. They may have different objectives, topography, things like that, but these properties had really good road networks and fire breaks already in place. And so they were kind of ideal for burning in this way. What it does is it allows for us to have a checkerboard distribution across the property of burned and unburned, different vegetative responses. And we've found, I think guys in Region 5 will agree with this, we found that it helps us meet our acreage goals. The way we burn is we're all on ATVs, and we will sort of hopscotch from burn unit to burn unit, burning one out and then moving on to the next. And so we're like little busy bees just going all over the landscape, getting fire done. And it works well for us. It helps us expand our burn windows because we're burning smaller blocks, which burn out quicker. And we've also found that it helps us keep track of mop up. If you come back by a stand late in the day, you lit at 10 o'clock in the morning and you see a bunch of smoke, it's a pretty good clue something's going on there to check out. So you can look on the map here. Even if some of these units are burned adjacent to each other, you know, one may be burned in March and one may be burned in May, so there's a different response. And even though they're smaller units, we might be burning 300 acres a day, 350, just depends on the day. And again, we burn off of ATVs primarily. You can see Brent Howes on his old ATV. On the back is an ATV torch. On the front is a water tank. And so we use those primarily. As far as fire breaks, we use several different things. A lot of times we'll use woods roads that are mowed and raked with a hay brake. That does a really good job of serving as a fire break without having to hair it up. We do have some haired breaks. We also use on a lot of properties, we use creek bottoms or drains to serve as breaks. You know, we'll let the fire naturally back down, like you can see in that picture, to the creek. And that way you don't have that hard edge where there's a fire break on the edge of every hardwood drain. But you do have to watch those sometimes, especially when the weather gets drier. One important thing I do want to mention is the importance of native ground cover. We try our best to protect that. That's a very valuable resource. We looked at how little longleaf is left in the Southeast. There's even less native ground cover. Once it's haired up, it's pretty much gone. So we avoid that when possible and try to use the same units over and over again. So the season of fire is always one. I think George is going to talk about growing season fire a little bit later, but I am going to touch on it now. Fire on the ground, I think, is the most important thing, regardless of season, but season does definitely have an impact. We burn early for young longleaf before it candles, and also some other stands when we can, because the longer that burn season, the more opportunities we have to meet our goals and to get fire on the ground. But we do a whole bunch of growing season fire for a couple of reasons. Number one, get better hardwood control. Once those saplings have sent a lot of energy up into the top, into growth, and then you knock them back, it helps. Another important factor, especially in our native ground cover, is it stimulates seed production in wiregrass and some native flowers. They were meant to burn that time of year because that's when we have most of our lightning. And so we try to mimic that sometimes too. There's always some concern about growing season fire with ground nesting birds. I would argue that the positives outweigh the negatives. Birds respond really quickly. And also, if you go back to scale, if you're burning on reasonable scales dispersed across the property and you're not burning 2,000 acres at one time, I think the long-term benefit is definitely worth it. And you can even burn into August or September or later in some cases. Just understand that the later you burn, the less time you have for that vegetation to respond post-fire. I burned a stand about 2 weeks ago, and it did wonderfully. I just put a few pictures in here of kind of what I'm talking about. This is a natural longleaf stand. You can see looking at it, there's not many mid-story hardwoods. It's open, there's diverse ground cover. This is on Silver Lake, WMA near Bainbridge. Here's a planted pine stand that's 25 years old. This is on River Creek, WMA near Thomasville. You'll notice it's open and sunny. There are diverse array of plants in the ground cover, and also there's plenty of trees to leave needle cast. Sometimes if you get too thin and don't have enough needle cast and don't have enough grass in your understory, it can be difficult to carry fire. That needle cast is pretty important. And last picture, this is a 50-year-old planted pine stand. This is at Chickasaw-Hatchie, WMA. This is a really nice stand, good ground cover. Lots of quail, might even be woodpeckers there one day, who knows. So does it work? What does it all this mean? I got some numbers here just to show you guys. And with regards to bobwhites, this top graph you can see, this is the difference from 2013 to 2025 on Chickasaw-Hatchie and Silver Lake. So since we went to 2-year fire return, smaller blocks, the quail population has responded quite nicely on both WMAs. The bottom graph is RCWs on Silver Lake, and you can see that's been a steady increase as well. The Backman sparrows, they thrive on these properties as well. I will note that other factors matter a lot with response of these birds. With regards to bobwhites, hunter management, harvest management, all that's very, very important. And with woodpeckers, a lot of the habitat work we do and putting in inserts is also really important. But without fire on the landscape, everything tends to fall apart. That's the most regular practice we do to benefit these species. I kind of did want to mention real quick, since I know that hurricane issues are a topic coming up after lunch. You guys see that dip right there in 2018, 2019 on the bottom graph? Any ideas what that is? It's Hurricane Michael when it hit Southwest Georgia back in 2018. We lost a lot of trees. We lost about 50% of our cavity trees. And unfortunately, the same thing just happened last fall at Moody Forest. We also lost about 50% of the woodpecker cavity trees there as well. So despite what you do, your best plans, you do end up with unplanned challenges, right? And I was just going to mention real quick kind of how we address those. The RCW was more impacted by the hurricane than probably bobwhites and Bachmans were, because they are absolutely dependent on the trees. And when you lose the cavity trees, they have nowhere to roost at night, and it takes them months to make new cavities. So they're very susceptible. So the biggest issue is getting access into these areas, clearing roads. Sometimes you can't even tell where the roads are anymore. Clearing the roads to get to the clusters so that we can triage them and evaluate what's lost, and then start replacing cavity inserts. You can see this bottom picture is a woodpecker cluster that's not many trees left. I did want to put in a picture here. This is after Michael, but you can kind of see some of the devastation, and you don't have a lot of trees left to choose from, but we'll go in and put inserts in very quickly, and it's been pretty successful in stabilizing these populations of birds after storm events. And that's Zach Henshaw at the bottom, back in his DNR glory days, putting in an insert. So start summing it up. The benefits of managing fire in these stands, whether you're a private landowner, you're on state property, not necessarily number one, but a huge benefit is aesthetics, right? We all like to look at a pleasing forest stand. We like them to look like they should and to be nice. So aesthetics and an intact ecosystem and good habitat is ultimately an investment for the future, right? If you're managing it well now, you don't have to worry about restoring it in the future. It's always harder to restore it down the road than it is to manage it now. Better hunting is very important, whether that's bobwhites, whether that's wild turkeys or white-tailed deer. If you're a turkey hunter, you know the importance of fire for turkeys as well. Fire provides really nice nesting habitat. Not long after a burn, you've got really nice brood rearing habitat for poults, and brood rearing habitat is probably one of the most limiting things with regards to poults in the Southeast. And for white-tailed deer, that young growth is far more nutritious and palatable than older growth. So there's lots of benefits for game species. It also creates and maintains this habitat for RCWs and tortoises and indigo snakes and things of that nature that are not just found everywhere anymore. So ultimately, whether you are managing a 10,000 acre WMA or quail plantation or back 40, fire is unquestionably, in my mind, the most important, versatile, and cost-effective management tool we have to maintain these stands. So with that, I don't know how I am on time, but perfect. Awesome. I'll take any questions.
You are perfect, Joe. Okay. Questions for Joe. Justin's got a mic. Raise your hand. Anybody? Aaron Cork has a question. This might be hard.
There you go. Hey, Joe, can you talk a little bit about how the birds are doing at Moody since Helene?
Yes. So Moody Forest, which is a TNC property and DNR property, over near Baxley, Georgia. It was right in the path of Helene. We had 11 groups of woodpeckers on Moody prior to Helene, and it absolutely got hammered. But we were fortunate to work with TNC to get in there to access these clusters. And we ended up replacing a lot of cavity inserts. And bottom line, this nesting season, we had 11 groups of woodpeckers and we had 11 groups before the storm. So I was very, very pleased we didn't lose any. Productivity went down a little bit, but the birds are still there and I think they'll recover and continue to thrive.
Thank you. OZA, question.
You know, you said model camp through Silver Lake, and y'all had to do a lot of emergency cleanup there. I was wondering, how did you come up with the funding for that?
Yeah, so that was really important. Silver Lake got hammered on a large scale. And we were fortunate to come through with, or NIFWIF came through with some funding from Southern Company and IP, and it really helped us out. They paid for road clearing, getting rid of down debris and woodpecker clusters, which was huge because we had so many tops down next to cavity trees. We never could have burned in there without losing what cavity trees were left. So they helped us out there, and that was a tremendous help.
Another question? All right.
Hey, Joe's great presentation. I know at Silver Lake, they had done some management trail there, including like putting in brood plots and that sort of thing, which is kind of, you know, there's a balance, I guess, because you destroy native ground cover to do that. But I was kind of wondering where that stands, if it's sort of kind of settled out to where they're going to stay with that now, or how you're dealing with that at Silver Lake.
Yeah, I think all the brood fields that are going to be in place at Silver Lake are already in place. Brian, Brent, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, there were some put in, but there haven't been any in a while, and I don't think there are plans for any more. With regards to the woodpeckers there, we're almost full with what the habitat can support until more comes online. But yeah, quail, the quail there are doing pretty well. Not Albany and Thomasville numbers necessarily, but you know. Anything else?
Another question?